Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, the BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia underscores the growing global divide as the group seeks to expand its influence amid competing Western institutions. With China and Russia at the helm, BRICS Plus now boasts new members such as Egypt, Iran, and the UAE, representing a significant portion of the world's population and economic output. Is this the beginning of a new multipolar world? Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this geopolitical shift is Jagannath Panda, director of the Stockholm Center for South Asian and Indo-Pacific Affairs. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thank you very much.
So we are looking at the BRICS Plus organization today, and before we start, of course, this is highly debated when it comes to the influence of this particular organization, ranging from perhaps there's more hype than substance to something to be really alarmed by. Which side of the spectrum do you find yourself in?
I think BRICS is emerging as a credible organization at a different level. In fact, if you see the trajectory of the BRICS, even though there has been a low momentum for last few years, but there has been continuous efforts by the Chinese and Russians to make it a much more multilateral organizations. And the expansion of the BRICS definitely suggests that there is a multipolar and multipolarity trend happening in global affairs. There is a greater connect is happening among the global South countries. And there is a clash of interest between China and India who wants to lead the global South populations. But the expansion of the BRICS, including Egypt, Iran, including Saudi Arabia and UAE, points that this is an organization where China and Russia wants to invest on. They want to build greater connect, which will create a credible alternative to pressurize the Western-led international order. Whether they can really sustain, whether BRICS can build that momentum, it's yet to be seen. But the Kazakh summit is really important as far as not only the future of the BRICS, but also how the new members will accommodate to the agenda of the BRICS. That needs to be seen.
Right, like I mentioned, of course, a lot is still unfolding, but in the meantime, the fact that more countries are being included is perhaps something to look out for. Now, we do know that this new summit brings together leaders from across the global South. Does this mean that there's a reflecting growing divide between the global North and the global South?
Of course, there is a divide existing, and this divide is good for China because they want to, showcase themselves as the leader of the global South. And this is a good development for Russia because after the attack on Ukraine, Russia has been clearly isolated in the international platforms. So Russia also needs some kind of momentum for its foreign policy and its global agenda. So that BRICS, a platform like BRICS and expanded BRICS provides to Russia and China. So therefore, there is a clear division is emerging. India's partaking in the BRICS is definitely a balancing chord. India wants to be with the West-led organizations. India also wants to be with China and Russia in the emerging economies world. And therefore, India's interest lies in both parts of the world. But while saying that, I think India's partaking in the BRICS and India's support to welcome UAE also creates some kind of balancing factor within the BRICS because we cannot allow China and Russia to dictate the terms and conditions within the BRICS. And there, India's partaking along with UAE brings a kind of a balancing and checks and balance turf within the BRICS. So therefore, a lot is unfolding, and probably this summit will see what would be the outcome, what would be the global agenda, whether this is very much restricted to global South or it has a different kind of agenda which will target to the Western audience and Western countries and Western-led institutions in global affairs.
Right, so this perhaps might have a little bit more impact than just the global South. And, well, you mentioned earlier that perhaps China and India's interests don't always align. And some critics argue that there is a little bit of lack of cohesion when it comes to the BRICS Plus organization, with some countries, even though they are aligned in this organization, don't really see eye to eye or even have historical tensions, such as India and China. How's these internal dynamics affecting the whole group's potential and cohesion?
I think there are two divisions primarily between China and India or China and the rest. China wants a kind of a leadership role in the global south, and therefore BRICS and the expansion of the BRICS comes as a medium for China to expand its influence in the global south formulations. Whereas India wants a kind of shared leadership. As you know, in the G20 summit in New Delhi, India welcomed the African Union to be a part of the G20 network. So therefore, India welcomes the developing world to be a part of this shared leadership formula. So therefore, India would like to see BRICS and the expansion of the BRICS as a shared leadership podium. So therefore, there is a clear division between the way China looks at it and India looks at it. China looks at a purely China-led initiatives, whereas India looked at it as a shared leadership. The other fundamental difference between China and the rest of the BRICS members are that China wants a much more dominated, singular, economic-oriented BRICS, where China wants that the Chinese yuan should be the medium of currency exchange, and therefore the Chinese are pushing that the BRICS countries should actually move away from exchanging their currencies via US dollar. But that may not be really conducive for all the members. Russia might be benefited of the Chinese proposal because Russia has been facing a lot of sanctions due to the Ukraine war, and therefore Russia might find the Chinese proposal quite interesting. But that would not be conducive to Indian interest. India is still very much interlinked and closely linked with the Western financial institutions, be it WTO, be it IMF, World Bank. And I think these are fundamental differences. But there is also a greater thematic difference the way China looks at BRICS and the other powers looks at it. China wants to make BRICS more of a Eurasia-led multipolar organization, and therefore the inclusion of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt has been kept in targeting, try to create a much more Eurasian-led organizations where China could dominate, because China wants a unipolar Eurasia led by China. Whereas India, countries like India and Russia, they want a multipolar Eurasia because it is benefiting for them. They could ask for a much more shared leadership, much more shared part-taking. So there are clear division between China and the other BRICS members that we should not really discount.
Right, that's very interesting. So again, like you mentioned, various different countries have their own interests, even going into the alliance such as BRICS. So their kind of internal dynamics might also shape this difference going forward. Now, also going to what you mentioned earlier with currency, because there is an idea that BRICS is going to float their own currency to kind of challenge the US dollar. In your opinion, you said that this perhaps is not a very feasible one. Where do you predict this attempt at the BRICS currency going?
It's a very complicated matter because it has to be discussed first within the BRICS Development Bank. Now, within the BRICS Development Bank, we have to see whether the BRICS countries are going for a singular currency exchange medium or they are going for a bilateral currency exchange medium. If they are going for a singular currency exchange medium, then whether it is the Chinese yuan which is going to be the medium of currency exchange, or it is going to be another common currency what the BRICS countries would agree. Now, countries like India would like to have a direct currency conversion medium with individual BRICS countries because that benefits to India. India would not like to endorse that the Chinese currency, that is yuan or RMB, should be the medium of exchange. So therefore, there are clear divisions between China and the other BRICS countries. Russia may find some kind of parity with the Chinese medium exchange because Russia is clearly becoming much more dependent on Chinese economy. So there might be some kind of understanding and parity between the Chinese and the Russian plan, but that may not be really conducive to countries like India or UAE or countries like Saudi Arabia, who are operating from a strength, and their economy is not really a struggling economy or a rising economy. They are a large economy to deal with in the global formulations.
Right, and last but not least, while we're looking at this BRICS Plus, it does look like an alliance of outcasts when it comes to these countries being, well, a lot of them being sanctioned by the U.S. and a large portion to the West. Do you think that these Western sanctions on like Russia, Iran, is actually pushing them closer together to form an alliance to challenge the Western economic system?
Clearly, yes, because if we see after the Russian attack on Ukraine, the authoritarian nexus in the Eurasian regions is clearly building up. There is a closer strategic affinity is happening between Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. And that is a serious development. And I think while there is a rise of Indo-Pacific and Indo-Pacific coalition led by the United States of America, on the other side, what we see, there is a rise of authoritarian nexus led by China and Russia. So there are clearly a development, and with the inclusion of Iran, countries like Iran in the BRICS formulations, there is definitely the Chinese game plan is to try to build a much more closer nexus with the countries those are anti-West. So definitely some of the plannings of the BRICS would be anti-West, particularly targeting the United States of America and the US-led financial institutions, where US has been a dominant actor, let's say WTO, World Bank, and IMF, which are classical Bretton Woods institutions. So BRICS is acting fast, evolving as a organization. Whether it will emerge as a credible organization to challenge the Western-led financial institutions, that yet to be seen. But I think this summit and the next few rounds of summit is going to be critical for the future of the BRICS.
Right, very well said. And of course, we'll be keeping an eye out, keeping our eyes peeled on the upcoming summit and bring more updates. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.